The Unearthed Arcana for Expert Classes is here, and I'm giving my honest review. So what is all included in this UA? We get Expert Classes, Feats, Spell List, and Rules Glossary. We actually get a surprising amount in this playtest. We get 37 pages worth of stuff. And mind you, some of the pages are actually eaten up by a bunch of magic, but regardless, we actually do get a decent amount of the material. So let's take a look about what's going on here and what are my actual thoughts. So starting off, we get the class groupings here. So we can see right away that there are groups of experts, mages, priests, and warriors. And each one has individual classes, and they tell you the kind of characteristics they're in. I think that's pretty smart to categorize them all between the four, because essentially that's what a lot of old school game was. You would essentially have subclasses of the mage, the thief, the cleric, and the fighter. And so this kind of ranges around just a little bit here and there, but I actually really like that. And also that really does let you diversify things, and we're going to be seeing that later on because we actually get feats that pertain to the group that you're in. You can only take certain feats if you're part of the warrior group or if you're part of the expert group, and so on and so forth. But what I will say is my first of many critiques is that expert sounds too experty, and new people showing up to the hobby are going to hear expert and say, oh, I don't want to do that, that sounds too scary. When in all actuality, the bard, ranger, and rogue are some of the more simple classes in this lineup. So I think the vernacular is just a little bit off there. Now moving on to the bard, the first of the three classes that we're looking at today, and I am here to tell you I think this bard frickin' sucks. And far more importantly is, not only do I think this new rendition of the bard sucks, it also highlights how they're going to be restructuring classes later on for all the other classes, and I'm here to tell you that sucks too. So starting off here, one of the main reasons why I don't like this new bard is because they are really trying to emphasize the fact that you are supposed to be playing D&D from levels 1 to 20. And why is that apparent? So for those of you that know Bard, you know that at 5th level, you get all your Bardic Inspiration back on a short rest finally. Because levels 1 through 4, you have to get it back on a long rest, but then level 5, oh that's awesome, you get it back on a short rest. You don't get that now until level 7. Big deal, right? You have to wait a whole 2 more levels, and that's pretty substantial. And also very important is the fact that we can see that the capstones have also been shrunk down. The pinnacle feature of all the classes has now been moved from levels 20 to now 17, 18, or 19. And now at level 20, every single class gets an epic boon. This is something I really don't like. We're going to be seeing the epic boons later on, but I don't think the epic boons should just be pick and choose. I think epic boons should be rewards for excellent roleplay and also the individual campaign that you're in. We are going to be looking at the epic boons later on, but that's just my little spiel here. But also, far more importantly, the reason I really don't like this bard is the fact that they made them spellcasters. And I'm not just talking about the spellcasters that there already are in 5th edition. I'm talking about they stripped away the Bardic Inspiration, so you have less Bardic Inspiration now, and you can only use it as a reaction instead of being proactive and using it whenever the heck you feel like. And now it is just a spellcasting class that gets to use their reactions every here and there and everywhere. It is just so boring, it's so bland. If I wanted to play a spellcaster, I would play a spellcaster. I don't see the bard as a spellcaster. I know some people do, but I don't think the bard deserves to be that. I think the bard should be entirely unique. Much like how the warlock is entirely unique, the bard should be unique as well. But the bard gets absolutely no love. And in fact, it actually gets hate in this whole thing, because now you only get a number of Bardic Inspiration die equal to your proficiency bonus. Meaning right away, from levels 1 to 4, you only get 2. Which, as we all know in 5th edition, you typically start off with 3. And you get more and more later on. The only time you get more Bardic Inspiration dice is at the very end at 17th level. Which, guess what? The overwhelming majority of people do not play at. Another reason I'm really not digging the whole bard thing here is the Songs of Restoration. You used to have a feature as a bard where if you took a short rest and you had a bard in the party, you get an extra d6 of hit dice, essentially. That's really cool. That's very thematic. The bard's boosting the party's morale and they're getting a little bit more healed. But here with this, they say, screw that. Who needs flavor and fluff and fun times when we can just give the bards new spells? Hey bard, at 2nd level you get Healing Word. At 4th level you get Lesser Restoration. At 6th level you get Mass Healing Word. boring. It makes them more spellcasters, which once again, I don't think the bard should be a primary spellcaster. I think their bardic inspirations and their counter charms and their various features should be the mainstay of the class to separate them from everybody else, because a bunch of other people can cast spells. What makes the bard any special now? Oh, and I just mentioned that counter charm thing. Guess what? That's not in here anymore, because that's fun. Rant over about bard, we're moving on to rangers, and the ranger I'm not as upsetty spaghetti about. This one has a bit more going on with it, and also very importantly, some things missing from it. So in this ranger, we're actually missing a whole bunch of the things about exploration, because rangers are the ones that are supposed to be, you know, rangering. They're supposed to be going out into the wild and doing things, but there is absolutely no mentions of going out into the wild. There's no difficult terrain movement being mentioned here. There is no, you know, moving about the place. There's no anything about exploration at all in here. They just stripped all of that away, which is really sad, because that's actually taking away a part of the pillar of D&D, which is exploration. But some of the features that Ranger had already took away some of that, so is what it is. So here we get new structure on favorite enemy. All hunters now have a free hunter's mark. This is not only a free hunter's mark, but this is also a concentration-less hunter's mark. So you have a free hunter's mark that you're always casting on people, and you're always doing an additional d6 of damage. Yeah, that's fine. Sure, why not? They get a new way of how they're focusing on spells, and they also get cantrips. So, yeah, take of that what you will. But their spell class, you know, there really shouldn't be a spell cast. They're marshals through and through. The newest feature here we get is at 7th level, we get roving. Your speed increases by 10 feet while you aren't wearing heavy armor, and you have a climb speed and swim speed equal to your speed. I think that's a bit overtuned, but, you know, I don't know how many people actually care about that, so who knows. At 11th level, we get Tireless, which is whenever you finish a short or long rest, you can give yourself temp HP equal to 1d8 plus your proficiency bonus. Sure, why not? And then also very interesting, and this is going to tie into later on, decrease exhaustion. If you are exhausted when you finish a short rest, your level of exhaustion decreases by 1. That's a very important deal, because exhaustion now has been reworked, and we'll be going to that later on, and that's some fun times. At 13th level, we get Nature's Veil. As a bonus action, you can expend a spell slot to become invisible until the end of your next turn. I dig that. That's pretty cool. And mind you, if you are invisible and you know, attack anybody, then your invisibility goes away anyway. So I think that's a perfectly fine use. That's a cute little, you know, invisibility thing that you can do as a ranger. I dig that. And we get to look at the hunter subclass of ranger, which, you know, it just does extra damage. I always think that extra damage is the most boring thing you can tack on to any class in the game, because why do something fun and intriguing and mechanically in-depth when you can just roll more dice, right? Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. And actually, we get to see it here. At 10th level, you get the Conjure Barrage spell. Instead of getting the multi-attack, which you would normally get, instead you can just cast the spell Conjure Barrage, and you can cast it at whatever level you want, which, you know, once again, I think that's kind of boring. So Ranger, I'm okay with. I think it's fine, fair, fun, but I think that there's a few things that they need to really work on here. And last, here we get to look at the Rogue. So the Rogue, there really wasn't too much that they did, but the things that they did was somewhat intriguing. So let's take a look at that. So first things first, Sneak Attack got a nerf, which might be a downer for a lot of people here. Once on each of your turns, when you take the attack action, you can deal extra damage, meaning that you can no longer get Sneak Attack outside of your turn, which I know a lot of people would set up where they can try and get a Sneak Attack outside of their turns and on their turns. Guess what? No more. You only get it once on your turn. That's the end of story. And here is another example of how they're trying to get people to play this game for higher levels and longer levels. 9th level evasion. As we all know, rogues get evasion at 7th level in 5e. So they're pushing evasion back a whole 2 levels. And everyone that's played a rogue or a monk that gets evasion knows the sweet, beautiful justice that is when you dodge a fireball and take no damage. They are pushing that back a whole 2 levels. And I know that's going to make a lot of people upset. And I'm going to be talking about this later in other videos, but just the stretching of the level design to try and get people to play for longer levels and for playing longer campaigns, it's not going to work. It just isn't. And unfortunately, the main classes are going to be stretched in an odd way, and I just think it's not going to be good. But speaking of those higher levels, here at 13th level, we get Subtle Strikes. You straight up have advantage on any attack roll that targets a creature within 5 feet of at least one of your allies who is incapacitated. So pretty much at any given point, under most circumstances, you're going to have advantage as a rogue, which is exactly what you want. You know, that's pretty freaking strong. And lastly, a fun little feature here at 17th level, no attack roll has advantage against you while you aren't incapacitated. So no matter what circumstances you are in, nobody can get advantage against you. I think that's really cool. I think that's very flavorful for the rogue, and I think that's a fantastic capstone. But once again, very few people are going to be playing at that high of a level. So now looking at feats. Feats now have multiple requirements. Feats can have a level requirement, they can have a class requirement, they can have a subtype requirement, they can have stat requirements, and I think that's a good thing because now they gate away some of these stronger feats to higher levels, which I think is a good thing. Having people start off with the strongest of feats is not good game design, and I think it's good that people eventually work into getting those stronger feats. And also very importantly is all these feats you can see here, like athlete and charger and things of that nature, every single one of these has been reworked to some degree. Some of the vernacular has changed, some of them have been buffed significantly, some of them have actually gotten some nerfs, some of them have swapped out what their abilities do. But very importantly is the overwhelming majority of the feats listed here all give ability score improvements. Whereas if you look at 5e, there's a lot of feats that do not give ability score improvements, but practically every single one here does. So looking at one of the more popular feats taken, Dual Wielder. Dual Wielder has essentially changed from its 5e counterpart. Because in 5e, you normally get a +1 to AC while dual wielding, and you can hold the two weapons that aren't heavy, and you can quick draw them. But here we get Dual Wielder, which is you need to be 4th level, you need to have proficiency with any martial weapon, and it increases your strength or dexterity by 1, instead of giving you that +1 to AC. So you can see there's a little bit of changes here and there and everywhere. Here is also where we get the list of epic boons, which essentially end up becoming feats, which, once again, I find incredibly boring. I think epic boons should be tied to individual stories and campaigns and adventures. They shouldn't just be tied to, oh hey, we killed 50 goblins, now I get an epic boon of dimensional travel. Which, by the way, that one is terrible. At 20th level, you get the privilege of casting Misty Step spell once without using a spell slot. Once you use the benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. That one is incredibly terrible. That is so terrible if you compare it to, let's say, the epic boon of Fortitude here. Your hit point maximum increases by 40. In addition, whenever you regain HP, you regain additional HP equal to your con modifier. So if someone slaps you with a healing word, your HP goes up not only by the healing word, but also your con mod. That is a very powerful boon. Getting Misty Step once? That's terrible, but whatever. Also, very importantly, two of the more taken feats of 5e, Great Weapon Master and a Sharpshooter, have removed the -5 to hit, +10 to damage attacks because I think those were incredibly boring, very stale, and just caused people to do the same thing over and over. So they removed those, and they gave you your ability score improvements, and that's pretty much it. They nerfed some things here, they buffed some things there, and they just changed things all over. Like the Mage Slayer here no longer operates as if someone casts a spell next to you, you can attack them. You basically get an advantage on if someone casts a spell against you. You know, I think that's kind of better in a way because Mage Slayer doesn't proc a lot of the time. And now we get a bunch of pages on the rules glossary here. We get a bunch of fun things, so I'm going to highlight the good stuff. Look at the exhaustion system. For those of you who have not seen the 5e exhaustion system, it's pretty hardcore, it's pretty grimy, but it almost never comes up mechanically. Here we get the inkling that it's probably going to be coming up more often, because instead of there being 6 levels of exhaustion, we now get 10 levels of exhaustion. Once you reach above 10 levels of exhaustion, meaning 11 levels of exhaustion, you die. We see that any number of levels of exhaustion that you have, you subtract that much from your d20 checks, which is a big deal. Whenever you go to roll a d20, and if you got 5 levels of exhaustion, that's -5 to the check. That's a big deal. Also, extremely importantly for spellcasters, subtract your exhaustion level from the spell save DC of any spell that you cast. Once again, if you have 5 levels of exhaustion, your DC is getting cut down by 5. That is tremendous. I really like that. I think that's good. I think that's a very solid change to the exhaustion system that never gets used because of how hardcore it is in 5e. And we can see here, of course, that when you finish a long rest, your exhaustion goes down by 1. Good stuff. You know, I think that's perfectly fine. Guidance, the cantrip, took a big hit. Guidance being the cantrip, which all the players say, DM, I'm casting guidance at all times, every single way that we go, no matter what. I'm casting guidance, go, go, go. Instead now, guidance is a reaction spell you use when someone fails and they can only have the D4, and you can only use this once per PC per day. So it is not spammable, it is not continuous, it only works once per PC. So I think that's actually a really good change to guidance. We get new rules on the inspiration, and now we see that if you roll a 1 on a d20 test, you get inspiration as a way to try and claw your way back from failure, which I think is perfectly fine. Sure, why not? I personally don't like the meta currency being tacked on into the regular portions of the game, but I know some people dig that, so it is what it is. A very solid change to hidden and invisible. When you are hidden or invisible and you roll initiative, you get advantage on initiative. I think that's actually really flavorful and actually mechanically very solid. Now we get a new type of action called influence, the influence action. This is a very big one. So D&D is a game of 3 pillars. There is combat, which we get plenty of rules on, exploration, which we get barely any rules on, and roleplay, which once again, we barely get any rules on. But here is the start. This is the beginning of having social interaction rules. The influence action is when you go to interact with an NPC, you can try and get them to do things. You influence them. And we get a little list here on 3 different ways NPCs are going to be acting toward the party. We have indifferent, friendly, and hostile. And we get a little nice flavor text of how they would actually operate here. We get interaction, and we get a little thing here on making ability checks to get them to do things. This is the start of a fantastic potential social interaction system. But I will say it is the start of one, because it is currently not that great. Right now, there's only 3 attitudes, which I don't think is good enough. There's indifferent, friendly, and hostile, and you make ability checks, and the ability checks DC is a bit strange, and it's a little bit wonky, but I'm here to tell you this is an incredibly good start. It's going to go forward, and if they actually put a lot of effort into the social interaction system, it's going to be solid. There's other game systems that have fantastic social interaction rules, and 5e doesn't. 5e just has, yeah, DM, just have them roll persuasion check if you feel like it, kind of, like the rules are very, very obscure and vague. And unfortunately, that's also where this is too. The rules are just not that great. We can see here that if you want to influence a hostile creature, it's a DC 10 check, and the creature offers no help but does no harm. DC 10, like at level 1, a PC can have like a +7 to their persuasion check, right? So, DC 10 isn't all that bad. So I know for a fact that they need to do a lot more nuance with that, and maybe that'll tie into the monster stat blocks. Maybe that'll tie into other features later on. Who knows? We get a major buff to long rest. Now when you long rest, not only do you regain all of your HP, you also regain all of your hit die, which before in 5e, you would only regain half of your hit die. So that's a tremendous deal. Your HP max is restored, and your ability scores are restored. If any of your ability scores were reduced, they return to normal, which people typically don't have to deal with because in 5e there's only like 3 separate things in all of 5e that actually reduce stats. I really like the rules clarification here on the magic action, because when you are casting magic, you are concentrating. That's something that a lot of people seem to forget, is when you are casting a spell, and if the spell takes longer than a minute, you are concentrating on that spell. So you have to follow the concentration rules on when you are casting a spell. And if for some reason concentration is broken, then the spell ends. However, as a generous gesture here, if your concentration is broken, the spell fails, but you don't expend a spell slot, which I think is incredibly generous. We get a new condition in slowed, which I think is really solid. We need more conditions. More conditions have a lot more flavor, fun, and a whole bunch of things we can tack on to spells, monster abilities, features, and so much more. Slowed is your limited movement. You basically have to spend an extra 1 foot of movement for every foot that you move, so you essentially have half movement. Attack rolls against you have advantage, and you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. Really solid. Need more conditions like this. Throw in more conditions. We also get the study action, which I thought was going to be interesting, and then unfortunately they didn't do anything with it. Because the study action is essentially saying, yeah, player, make a roll on things that you would have already made rolls on. Because as you can see here in the areas of knowledge, little blurb there, that's things you would have already done anyway. If you want to make a study action, you would say, hey, player, what do you do? The player says, oh, hey, what's that flower? And you would say, hey, roll a nature check. So this doesn't actually clarify anything. It doesn't do anything new, which is really unfortunate. I think they should really do more with a study action, because I think a study action could be actually very interesting. And the last interesting thing here is the unarmed strike gets a whole bunch of changes. When you make an unarmed strike, you can choose from the following. You can do 1 bludgeoning damage plus your strength mod. You can grapple, and now grappling, instead of it always being a contested check, is now just a DC that you impose, and it's, pretty solid. And lastly, there's the shove, which we could already do normally. The shove is either you knock them prone or you push them 5 feet. but more often than not, making someone go prone is incredibly strong. So what are my overall thoughts on this? If I had to give this a ranking, I'd give this UA a solid 6 out of 10. I think there is some solid directions that some things are going in here. But unfortunately, that bard, oh my gosh, I can't get over how bad this new bard is. Not only do they remove what makes this bard truly a bard, they just make it a spellcaster. If I wanted to be a spellcaster that just casted spells the whole time, I would play a wizard. Don't make the bard just the wizard light. Make the bard the bard. I can't get over how bad the bard is. But I think the rogue and ranger are going in okayish directions. They just need a little bit more work. I really like the clarification of classes being in their little areas. I really like some of the new features coming in. I like the new feats. I like a whole bunch of the new things. But the class design, I think, is just really the biggest thing that's going to be a turnoff. Because, as mentioned before, the overwhelming majority of people that play D&D do not go to high levels. They just don't. The average game goes from levels 3 to 10/11. Most people don't play tier 3 that much. Most people don't play tier 4 at all. And you know they're just stretching out those features and enticing everyone with those epic boons to try and play high levels. But there is a myriad of reasons why people do not play the high tiers of play. And it's not just because there isn't that much for high tiers of play. I promise you it's not. There is a number of factors as to why people do not play high tiers of play, and Wizards of the Coast can only push people so hard, but it's not going to be good enough. So those are my thoughts on the new UA. What are your thoughts? Are you digging the thing so far? Do you actually disagree with me? Do you want the bard to be a spellcaster? How do you feel about a whole bunch of these things? I would love to hear it, but that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.